Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Soul Podcasting Podcast. I have a phenomenal guest with me today, the GOAT, Dave Jackson. He's launched the School of Podcasting way back in 2005. He's been helping people for the past 20 plus years as a consultant in podcasting. He wrote a book about podcasting and over 30 different podcasts he has launched. They've had, I think, over 4 million downloads. So we have a lot to chat about. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Oh, thanks for having me. This should be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm so honored to speak with you because, again, I'm just like a groupie. I've been watching you, listening to you for 2 decades. So this is like an honor for me. So I'm really happy. And I know that you have the School of Podcasting, which is on my app right now. So I've been listening to that. I think you have about 1,000, maybe more.
I'm coming up. I think last week was 988 or something like that. But sometime this year I'll go over 1,000. That's going to be weird. So
that is wild. I love it. I love it. That means you've been consistent. You've been
putting
out those episodes week after week.
My favorite was it was a Sunday night. I was coming home from an event and a deer took out my car. And I always travel with a microphone and a laptop. And then all my files to make a podcast are in the cloud. And so I recorded my episode in a hotel room and still didn't miss my Monday, So for 20 years, I've not missed a Monday.
Not missed a Monday. That's amazing. Talking about some consistency and just getting in there and doing what you do and not taking time off. Just like, hey, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I want to do it. So here it is every Monday.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so there's my first question for you. And I've always wondered, how did you get inspired to start podcasting when it first started? Because this is like way back when it was just nobody had heard of what podcasting is. So what made you get into podcasting?
Yeah, I had seen so many things come and go. Like I kind of missed, and this makes me sound like I'm 4,000 years old, but I kind of missed the MySpace boat. And then there was another thing, and I kind of and so I was already working on the internet. I was teaching people about, I literally taught people how to send email, which again makes me sound like I'm 4,000 years old. But a friend of mine had gone to this conference and he's like, hey, you know how you missed MySpace? And I'm like, yeah, don't rub it in. He goes, I've seen the next big thing. And I go, what is it? And I go, podcasting. And I went to Google, I typed in podcasting and there was 1.5 pages. And I go, wait, how do you spell it? And he goes, it's POD casting, typed it again, put it in. I'm like, dude, I think we broke the internet. There's nothing about this. And so I kind of parted one together. And I just remember when I uploaded my file and then I saw it come down in this archaic software and I was like, oh, I get it. But I started taking a blog that I was writing for musicians at the time. And probably within a month, I got a voicemail from a guy named Michael Van Laar. And he was in Nuremberg, Germany. And that's when my brain went, wait, I'm in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. It's me and a bunch of cows. And some guy in Germany not only found my show, but liked it and sent me a voicemail. And I just grabbed, the podcasting flag. And I claim podcasting in the name of Dave. And so that's what really, it's kind of funny because if you give a podcast to a teacher, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to learn about each other's cultures. And I was picturing listening to, I want to listen to a podcast from Italy or wherever, and so that's kind of normal for a teacher. If you give a podcaster or a podcast to maybe a salesman, they're going to want to sell. Right. If you give a podcast to, whoever. So it's always kind of interesting giving someone the tool just to see what they're going to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It brings out the best or the worst. It's like whatever's in you,
that's
going to come out in your podcasting. And so you were a teacher. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I literally have been, and that wasn't my original degree. I was a copier technician, and then they just needed somebody that knew computers to teach something. And I kind of fell into it, and then later went back to college and got a degree in teaching. Yeah. But yeah, I remember teaching people how to surf the internet because they didn't know what it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So then you started the school of podcasting. So that shows the teacher in you wanting to help people learn the ropes of podcasting, right?
Yeah, I had a part-time job. I was a waiter the first time I went to college, and now I had been let go of my job and I went to get a teaching job, and they're like, "You don't have a degree in teaching." And I'm like, "No, I know it's in electronic engineering." They're like, "We can't even talk to you without a teaching degree." So
Wow.
I was like, "How am I gonna make money enough to keep me in, car, phone, insurance, and books?" And so it's funny because I did exactly what I tell people not to do, which is I started a podcast to make money quickly, and that does not work.
Didn't work.
Which is also why I was in a band, giving guitar lessons, building websites. I had like 5 side hustles going on at the time. But yeah, it was crazy back then, and but I really had no clue what I was doing, but I had heard someone say, hey, the next big thing is going to be membership sites. And then I'd already knew podcasting was coming. And I was like, ooh, let's Reese cup this thing. What if we put these two together?
Good idea.
And I had no idea how to run a membership site. Started off stupid, like so many mistakes. Like my favorite was when I opened the door, it was $5. That was it. Five.
Okay.
And I was thinking, man, if I could get 100 people to give me $500, it's $500 a month, this blah, blah, blah. And
Hmm.
you need a friend to tell you the truth. And he called me, he said, hey, Dave, I checked out your website and all. He's like, can you answer a question for me? I'm like, sure. And he goes, can you name anything on the internet that has any real value for $5? And I go, no, not really. Just, cheap stuff that you get from, China or something like that. He goes, yeah, exactly. And he goes, and how much are you charging? And I go, and it was funny. As I raised my price, I would get more students. And which seems weird. You think it was like, oh, it's cheap, but they just saw it and was like, well, that can't be any good. It's $5.
Psychological thing. Like
Yeah.
if there's more value, it costs more. I need to get into this school of podcasting right now. Like,
Yeah. Perceived value. And I was like, huh. So that was a lesson I learned right up front. I was like,
yeah.
oh, okay. So
It's
yeah, but
amazing
it's,
that you were on the front end of this, though, that you saw the beginnings of podcasting and the beginnings of membership sites. And then you kind of merged those two concepts together and started your membership site for podcasting. So that's a huge thing. You're probably the first, I'm guessing, membership site for podcasters.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
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 And, it was fun because I got to watch like the tech kind of bubble was the first one because we were the nerds that were figuring it out.
Hmm.
And then there was a huge language bubble that people were using it to learn a second language. And then the comedians came and, Adam Carolla and Ricky Gervais and Adam Carolla. And then Mark Maron, of course,
Yeah.
was kind of came along. And then true crime came along and hasn't left. It's just there hasn't really been another bubble that's like, oh, everybody's talking about this.
Yeah.
But it was fun to watch. And I remember when Apple added podcasts to the iPhone.
Hmm.
And that's when people talk about hockey stick growth. And I actually remember when they added iTunes, which was, again, makes me sound ancient before, smartphones. But when that happened, I just saw my numbers just turn into a hockey stick. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yep.
So,
I remember those days. It was wild. It was mind blowing because everything was changing so quickly. I remember what do you call those little iPods or
oh
something?
yeah, there were iPods, there were
Yeah.
the iPod Nano. That was
Uh-huh.
that was the stupid one because it didn't have a screen.
Right.
And so it was meant
I
for
had
like
that one.
joggers. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, all those things. And that was the thing that made things kind of confusing is I talked to someone about podcasting because if you stand next to me longer than 10 minutes, I'll start talking to you about podcasting. And that was always one of like, do I need an iPod for that? I'm like, no, you just need the internet and speakers. That's really all you need. But
Yeah. Yeah. I think at first it was like internet radio. And then
yeah,
suddenly we're zooming into this whole like what's an RSS feed and how do we syndicate this? And so that's wild. So okay. Now you've been doing this so long and I'm thinking I need to ask you what you've seen that's changed over time with your love for podcasting or maybe what you've seen about podcasting over the years, like what has shifted, if anything, that you feel about just the art of podcasting. What's it like now versus 20 years ago?
well, the thing now is everybody and their brother has a podcast. It's almost like having a, Twitter or Blue Sky account. It's like, oh, and here's my podcast. The thing that's changed over the last 3 years And it's kind of a divisive kind of, line in the sand kind of thing, is YouTube calling it a podcast. And technically, so I got to get my nerd on, technically YouTube is not a podcast. And I'm not sure why being a YouTuber, well, I know why people don't want to be YouTubers, because all this money started flowing into podcasting. And YouTube was like, well, all the podcasters are getting money. Meanwhile, TikTok is starting to take some of their advertising money. And YouTube was like, hey, we got to get people talking about YouTube again. Like, Larry, what do you got? And Larry's like, I don't know, podcasting is hot. And they're like, that's it. Everybody on YouTube is a podcaster. And they wave their magic wand. And I was like, so, and I don't mind that until reports come out. And they're like, oh, this is the, and I'm like, well, some of that's YouTube. And so it gets a little, weird. And then they're just so different. Like for me, the worst consumption rate, in other words, how far have people listened on an audio podcast that's 90 minutes long that I do every Saturday, is like 70. That's the worst. The best on YouTube is 53. Oh. People don't, because YouTube is constantly just going, hey, here's something else you can watch over here. Looky over here, Right. And so it's so distracted. Yeah. So I'm not anti-video. The thing that just kills me is I'll have somebody come up and they'll say, I have this idea for a podcast, and they'll tell it to me. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. And I'm like, how long have you been thinking about this? And they're like, 3 years. And I'm like, well, what's stopping you? And they're like, I don't want to do video. And I'm like, you don't have to do video. Right. And they go, no, everybody says I have to do video. I go, everybody is YouTube. And of course they're telling you to do video. I go, you don't have to do video. You don't have to shower. You don't have to get camera ready. Just, talk into a microphone and off you go. And it's actually easier. And then the other thing is audio outperforms video 15-1 right now.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, when I worked at Libsyn, I was the head of podcasting there for 8 years. Bill Maher, the comedian, launched his show called Club Random, and he was just going to do video. And we're like, Bill, you kind of want to do audio? And he's like, audio schmaudio. I'm like, Bill, seriously, do audio. And he's like, all right, whatever. And so he launched both a video and audio version of Club Random, and then hired a PR agency that only promoted the video side completely. He didn't really want the audio thing. And when the numbers came in, the audio outperformed the video 15-1.
Whoa. That's encouraging in many ways, though, for our listeners today, because a lot of people have had that, like, just that feeling of, I want to start, but I don't really want to show up on camera. And like you said, you don't have to.
No.
In fact, that's not what podcasting was to begin with.
Yeah. And I always say, look, if you've got the drive and the budget and the time and you want to be on YouTube, be on YouTube. I'm not saying don't go over there. It's the person that doesn't want to, and then they don't do anything. And I'm like, oh, that's killing me. So.
Yeah. Just get out there and do it. Audio is good. I didn't know that stat about 15-1. So that's amazing. Okay. Well, there are people, so I'm in my late 40s. There are people in 40s, 50s, and they might think, okay, well, have I missed my cutoff time to jump into podcasting? Is it too late? Just kind of hesitating that maybe they're just not in a position where they can. And so I would just love to hear you give some encouragement for those of us who are a little bit older who want to get in podcasting. What do you say to us?
Yeah, well, first things first, they go, oh, me and technology, we don't get along. I hear that a lot. And I'd be like, okay, have you ever been in the car and your jam comes on? So you're like, oh my gosh, I love this song. I remember this. And you crank up the radio and then the phone rings. So what do? Well, you turn down the radio so you can hear your phone. And I'm like, you know how to mix audio. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, okay, sure. And I'm like, have you ever attached a photo to an email? And they're like, yes. I go, then you can upload an MP3 file to a media host. I'm like, I'm not saying there's no learning curve. I'm just saying it's not half as scary as you think it's going to be. Right. And then the other thing is, they always think, well, there's so many podcasts out there. There are 4 million, the last time I checked, podcasts, but there's only about 250,000 that are active. And a lot of those are really bad. There are people going, is this, hello? I don't know. It's blinking. Marge, do you, and that's it. That's episode 1. And they never came back for episode 2. So don't get too worried about that. And we all have imposter syndrome. We think nobody would listen to us. My favorite example of this, there's a documentary on Netflix, and it's Garth Brooks. And this is Garth back when he was, Garth Brooks. And in fact, Giuliani was still mayor of New York, and they gave him like the key to the city, and he just got some sort of platinum gold record thing for best top selling male artist, whatever. But he was convinced. He's like, look, I'm a country boy. I'm in the big city, and he was going to play Central Park. And he had just convinced himself that nobody was going to show up. And that's where podcasters kind of feel like that. Nobody's going to listen to me. And so he's sitting there, and finally he was in his hotel. He closed all the windows. He didn't want to see because he was convinced nobody's going to show up. Finally, his tour manager comes in and says, hey, Garth, they had to move the barricades. He's like, ain't nobody coming, is there? And he's like, no, there's 820,000 people out there. And he's like, what? And he goes, yeah, there's 820,000 people out there. And Garth's like, I can't believe that there's that many people. And he goes, oh, no, Garth, that was 20 minutes ago. He goes, that's why they're moving the barricades. And by the time he actually hit the stage, it was almost 1 million people.
Oh.
And he was convinced nobody was going to show up. And we all think, especially if we have some sort of, kind of niche topic that we want to talk about, we think everybody knows this because you hang out with other people that know the same thing you do. That's why you like them. And I never will forget, I was out to dinner once with somebody, and I said, oh, man, total Pete Best. And she said, who's Pete Best? And I go, you don't know who Pete Best is? And she's like, I have no idea. I've never heard that name in my life. I'm like, you're kidding me. And she's like, no. I go, he's the original drummer of the Beatles before Ringo. And then he got kicked out. And she's like, I've never heard that in my life. And I go, and she goes, look, you're a musician. You hang out with other musicians. Everybody knows that in your circle, but I'm here to tell you, nobody outside of musicians know who Pete Best is. And so I think we kind of do that a lot to ourselves, where we know whatever your hobby is or whatever you want to talk about, you think everybody knows it because everybody you hang around with does. But there are a lot of people that want to hear that because they don't know that stuff.
That's true. That's true. It's just a matter of us getting acclimated to this industry of podcasting, and we can learn from people like you and your school, and just understanding that it's never too late. We're never too young. We're never too old. The whole hesitation of, can I really do this? And will people really listen to me? I love your illustration of like, okay, nobody's coming to this concert, and then there's 800 and there's 1 million. And so I think it's like that with podcasting, where we start off thinking nobody's going to be listening to me, little old me, like who's listening? But with time and consistency, that 0 turns into 5 people, 5 downloads,
That's
maybe
it.
10, maybe 500. And then before you know it, it just like multiplication factor, right?
Well, and Mark Maron is a guy that's been doing a podcast for 16 years, got to interview President Obama when he was in office. Big podcast. He just announced, you know what? I'm a little crispy. He's doing acting now, plus he's a comedian. He's like, I think I'm done. I'm going to go out, leaving people wanting more. He goes, I might come back later, but for now I'm out. Okay, well, there's hundreds of thousands of people that are it's not like they're going to ride to work and go, well, I'd be listening to Mark, but Mark's gone, so I'm just going to ride to work in silence. No, they're going to go find something else.
Right.
And, podcasting's around 20 years old. There are a lot of OGs that are like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go play with the grandkids. They've been doing this a while, and somebody's going to take that seat. So it's the same way. Why are there kids in college right now, playing football? They're like, they're never going to be Tom Brady. Well, no, but Tom Brady retired. Eventually somebody's going to take that spot. And why not you? So many people are like, well, I can't be Joe Rogan. Well, Joe Rogan was just a comedian that happened to be in the right place at the right time, and then got a TV show, and then got another TV show. And in all those instances, he took advantage of the opportunity, and that led to something else and led to something else. And he's just being Joe. He's just a super curious guy. And I don't want to do a 3-hour show, but Joe does. And apparently people like that. So, be yourself, get out there, hit the microphone, and see what happens.
Right. Never know what you might like. Never know what a listener might like. And so just try it. Yeah, I love your advice there. I love that. Now, you've been doing this, like you said earlier, for 20 years. Every Monday, you don't miss a beat. And so my question for you then is, how do you not miss a beat? What makes you consistent and keep coming back to the microphone?
Yeah, it's just something, I didn't start out that way. I just knew I was going to do it weekly. And then all of a sudden I looked up and I was like, oh, wow, I didn't miss a Monday all year. And that just became a thing. I'm like, okay, I'm never missing a Monday. And
Hmm.
it's just something like in July, I'm going to be speaking in Chicago. So whatever weekend that is, I'm going to do 2 shows that week, one for the current week
Hmm.
and one for the following week. And that just means it's kind of, it's a lot, it's double the work.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's, that's what keeps me consistent. So I just look ahead.
Yeah.
And the other thing I do is there are topics all over you. The problem is you see them and go, ooh, that might be good for the podcast. And then you go, I'll have to remember that. And then you don't. And then, later you see something else. Oh, I'll have to write that down, but you don't. And it just evaporates. I learned, write it down. Back in the day, I used to use Evernote and then they tripled their price. So now I use an app called Evernote. And anytime I see something to come across, I open up my phone, or if it's an email, I can forward it to the app. And there are times when it's Wednesday and the
Hmm.
show's going out on Monday, and I go, I have no idea what I'm talking about this week. And I'll just go into my NoteJoy app and I'll be like, oh, I totally forgot about this. Yeah, I could talk about that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be NoteJoy. It could be Apple Notes. It could be, it could be an actual physical notebook, whatever you want to do.
Hmm.
But you have those ideas. Just don't don't rely on your memory, because
Right.
as the older we get, the worse that gets as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, we need those note apps, and I
Yeah.
love that you made it part of your. It's basically a part of your lifestyle. This is your routine, your rhythm. It's what you do. So, like you said, like when you're gonna do 2 shows, and then you know what your routine is. You're taking your notes app with you, and anytime you get an idea, you're putting that down in your notes. So it sounds like it's very much integrated with your life,
Yeah,
and
and
yeah.
my family knows, don't call Dave after 2 p.m. on Sunday, because that's podcasting
When
time.
you're recording.
Yeah, and that's when and it's kind of weird because I know a lot of people record in they batch record. I record the show I'm releasing. I start Sunday at 2. I record it. I edit. I write my show notes. Make the artwork. I'm a army of one, and it's out by midnight. And usually it's done by, I don't know, if I start at 2, and that's the problem because I know I have till midnight. So, you stop and you eat a little lunch and you eat a little dinner, but it's usually done in probably, I don't know, 6 hours or so doing everything.
Yeah.
And because I always want to listen to it, the times I do not listen to it, because I know I just heard it. I just heard the whole thing. I just did it. I don't need to listen to this. And I publish it, are the time when I listen to it the next day and go, oh, there's 10 seconds of silence. I forgot to, unmute this channel. Or, there's a part where I'll be like, I'll make a mistake. I'll pause for what I feel is a long time, but it wasn't long enough. So I didn't see it and I left it in there. So you hear me go, all right, edit that out. And then I don't. You hear me telling me, edit this out.
Right, right.
So I always leave room to listen to it one more time before I upload it.
Yeah. But I love the freedom of how you do it. Like, there's no set rules in podcasting. And I love that you are doing it your way, which is you do it all in one fell swoop on one day. And some people love the batch recording, but for you, it's just do it on the fly when you need to do it and record it on the same day. Edit, record, and publish the same day, right?
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, because sometimes somebody try to get in my head on when I do and do not use sound effects. And
Mhm.
I go, that is strictly on a game day decision. Some days I'm feeling goofy and I'll throw in some sound effects, and some days I don't. I go, if you're trying to figure out when and when not to, I go, there's no rhyme or reason to it. There are just times when, like, oh, we need a rim shot here, or we need somebody going, ha ha, or whatever. And I'm like,
Oh, that's
I'll,
cool.
I'll
I
just
love
pop
that.
them in. So.
So are you using a special device for your sound effects since you're doing it kind of live?
Yeah, it's all I record. Well, first, my workflow is I have to write a blog post or something, because ADHD is my middle name. So if I just turn on I think the record was I recorded something 5 times, and because I'm like, oh, I know it, it's up here in my head, and I just hit record and I go off on a tangent, and I would go, and I was like, So after about the 5th time, I'm like, let's get some bullet points going, shall we? Let's keep me on track. And so, but then I learned, hey, I do the bullet points, and after I recorded it and I'm typing the show notes, I was like, oh, what would have been a really good point here is this. Well, it's already recorded. And so I learned, hey, writing out my thoughts helps me really figure out what the heck am I trying to say, what I want people to feel, what am I really going for here? What's the takeaway that they're going to be like, oh, I'm so glad I listened to that. So I do that first, but I don't read it because who wants to listen to someone read their podcast because it doesn't sound, like no. So I write it out, figure out what I'm trying to say, write a few bullet points, and then I just talk to my invisible friend across the desk. And that does mean there are going to be times when I'm in the middle and my mouth doesn't work or whatever, and I just stop and pause. And, you hear those now in the blooper reel. But yeah, I have to figure out what am I saying, and then I just try to talk. And if I'm not excited about it, then that's the first thing. It has to be something I want to talk about.
Thing you want to talk about. And I love hearing from you because being in the game for so long and you're saying that, hey, even I'm not perfect at everything and mistakes happen, things happen, and it's what it is, but I still keep going because I love podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are just times when, you learn things like don't eat peanuts before you record because all of a sudden you're in the middle of a sentence, that whole 9 yards, or just times when your mouth just doesn't work. And you know what you're trying to say, and your mouth is just not keeping up with your brain. And you're like, okay, well, that's not right. There's no S in that word or whatever. And I'm just like, so for me, I now go in, cut that out, put it in the blooper reel pile. And then I go back, and it's almost like singing along with a song where you hear them, and I'll be actually talking with me. And then where the original me stops, I hit record and start talking. So you don't have a sentence where all of a sudden I'm talking, like there's no big, huge jump. I kind of sound like that. Now there's going to be a little bit of a weird gap of space there. And when I get done making whatever my point was, I go back and cut out the space, and it just sounds like I'm brilliant. It's like, no, I'm not.
I love that you have a bloopers reel because to me it's like saying, hey, we're podcasters, we're human, and you don't take yourself too seriously. You're just like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
But then that's why we love you so much. Like you just show us who you are and you're so real, and the bloopers reel is fun. That's fun.
Yeah. It was something I always like to just try stuff, because you never know. And so this one time I just had a bad day and I just started keeping them. And I put them at the end, and I got so much feedback at the end. They're like, I thought you were like this unattainable perfection. I'm like, oh, so far from it. And so I've kept them in pretty much ever since. If I'm on, because there are days it always seems like it's either, thumbs up or thumbs down. And when I'm, can't get the intro out, I'm like, oh, it's going to be one of those days where the mouth has already gone home. And I'm like, all right, I need you for about another hour. Come on, mouth, And I just start stockpiling them, and I'm like, all right, the blooper reel is going to be longer than the actual episode at this point.
That's funny. I love that. That's what makes it relatable, fun, and I just that's so cool. But now, so we have like a lot of listeners who are very much wanting to use podcasting for business, for integrating into their routine for their entrepreneurship journey. So how valuable do you think podcasting is for an entrepreneur or a thought leader? And then how can they integrate this into their life? Because podcasting it's for everybody and anybody who wants it, but business is a whole different ballgame. So how do you combine those?
Yeah, because you've got the content, again, you just don't realize it.
Yeah.
But for me, I always say record a few episodes and time everything. Whether it's on your phone or whatever, because you might get done and that 15-minute podcast just took you, 3 hours. And you're like, wait, what? I thought it was just going to take me 15 minutes. Okay, well, it took you 3 hours. Do you have 3 hours a week to do a podcast? And you're like, well, actually, I was going to do 3 15-minute episodes. Okay, do you have 9 hours a week? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, guess what? You're not doing 3 a week then. So that's the first thing, because you want a consistent schedule so that you are then... I've had people, I think my favorite was, Dave, you're with me every Monday on the way to the feed store, right? Because this guy goes to the feed store on Monday, but you become part of their routine, which is huge. That like Friday, which is today as we record this tonight, you ready to hear how I party on Friday? That's right. I go grocery shopping at Walmart, but I'm listening to the Podcasting 2.0 show. That's my routine.
Wow. Okay.
Slap on Dave and Adam. Why do I grocery shop on Friday? Because there's nobody in there on a Friday night. I'm like,
That
all
makes,
right,
that makes
zip
sense.
in and zip out. So there's that. Then when you deliver good content, whatever that is, right? It's like you help them in this way, or I didn't know that, or if it's entertaining. I always say you got to make people either laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain. Because if you're not doing any of those, there's a name for it, and
Laugh.
it's laugh, cry, think, groan. And we all have those, right? The hate watch,
Mm-hmm.
educate, or entertain. If you're
Oh,
not if you're not doing any of those, there's a word for it, and it's called boring. Don't do that. Right?
right.
Because I did that because for a week I wrote down everything I watched, read, or listened to. And then I said, why? Why did you watch an episode of Seinfeld that you've seen 5 times? Well, because it made me laugh. Okay. Why did you do that? Okay, I was being educated. Why did you watch this? Because it's a great way to just turn off my brain and it entertained me. Okay. So I just kind of went down the list. I'm like, that seems to be it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you can do that, they like you because your content is good and you're saving them time or money or whatever it is, or you're helping them forget the fact that their boss is a jerk and whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seen as trustworthy because you're there every whatever your schedule is. They like your content because you're helping them,
Right.
and then when your content is good and they try it, they're like, hey, that actually worked. I didn't know that if you do this or that. So now they trust you.
Yeah.
And so the thing is then when you say, oh, by the way, I have coaching, I have courses, I have books, whatever it is, it's not a cold lead anymore.
Yeah.
And that's really where it comes into play. And then the other thing is if you can get them engaged, they will say things like a lot of my episodes come off of emails I get from people and they're like, well, what about such and such? And I'll give them the answer, but I'll write it down in my NoteJoy and like, hey, this is a future episode. That's a good question.
Mm.
So, but yeah, the know, like, and trust factor really does, warm things up. And the very first couple years of the School of Podcasting, I have a coupon code, listener, which I first found out that a lot of people don't know how to spell listener. So I always go, well, it's LISTENER.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to say 90% of the people that signed up use that coupon code. Well, the fun thing was I never put it on the website. The only way you heard that coupon code is if you heard it because you were a listener, hence the
Oh,
coupon code. And
wow.
so I did that to go like, is this even worth it? And when I saw that coupon code coming through, I'm like, oh, this is definitely worth it. This
Yeah.
is, so it is. That's really where it comes into play.
They've been hearing you and they trusted you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you're like, I don't know where to start, take those questions that you're like, oh, if somebody asked me that again, oh, I just can't take it. Right. And so for me, and look, I will answer it all day long, but I hear the question, what's the best microphone under $100 daily, right? It's the Samson Q2U. But that's your first episode. Whatever it is, those questions that you're like, how do I make money with a podcast? How do I, mine, I have the ones I hear every day. Well, that people are looking for that content.
Yeah.
So why not make that an episode? And then you just treat yourself like a sponsor if you're an entrepreneur.
There you go. There you go. And that's just as simple as it is to get started, especially with the entrepreneurial focus. It's just what are people already asking you and what kind of value do you bring to your current clients? Bring that value to your podcast and just answer those questions. I like that you said that's your first episode right there, whatever you've been asked. And I think that the other part of it is just going for the long haul, just being consistent and
Yeah.
continuing to stay on the journey because those first couple episodes, they can be fun. They can be just, this life-changing thing. I've got this podcast now, but then now comes the staying consistent and doing it for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Like,
Yeah.
how do you stay consistent? And I guess what I would love for you to do is just give a piece of advice to someone who wants that long haul, who wants to stay in it. What would you say to them?
Well, again, it goes back to the thing that burns people out is when I look at the shows that I used to do that I don't do anymore, it became too hard to do. Like I did one called Web Tools Radio. And after doing that for about 10 years, I was like, you know what? I think I've talked about every web tool there is to talk about. And I
Yeah.
kept, it took more time to find them. And then I was like, well, yeah, I guess people might want this. And so I wasn't excited about it. And it just took too long to find something. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm done. Thank you so much. I'm over here if you want me, that kind of thing. So that's where, again, writing down your ideas, because you will have those times you're like, I have no idea. And then you go and you're like, oh, I got 7 ideas to pick from. Okay, well, now it got easy again. And then what I do is I hang out where my audience is. So for me, that's Facebook groups, not to go in and go, hey, look at me, buy my stuff, because we all hate that guy. But I'm just there to lurk. And then I'll answer questions, because most of them don't want you to self-promote. So, but I do have enough people like, who is this guy that's always answering the questions? And then they click on me and they follow me over. But Facebook, Reddit, I used to hang out in Quora. I don't as much, because Quora made this weird program where they would pay you if you asked questions. So there's just really stupid questions over there now that people are just putting to earn their 5 cents a question kind of thing. So I'm usually there just to listen. And then I started a show on Saturday mornings called Ask the Podcast Coach, because again, the teacher, the people pleaser of me, hates when people go, well, I joined your website, but I can't afford it. And I was like, oh, I want to help though. So I do a thing now for 90 minutes on Saturday mornings at 10:30 Eastern, where I'll just answer whatever your question you got. And then I turn that into a podcast.
So it's live? It's like they can call in?
Yeah, it's funny. You can actually jump into the video, or you can ask the questions via chat. And I grew up, there was a guy before Oprah named Phil Donahue, and he was always like, is the caller there? And I bought this huge board, and it was super technically challenging to have an actual call-in show, especially when you're an army of one. And it dawned on me after about 6 months of this, my audience doesn't want to call in. They want to put their question in the chat. And now with things like Ecamm and StreamYard and, Riverside, it's like, let's give the people what they want. So,
Right.
But
I love that you have this, that you offer like an opportunity for people to talk to you live, ask you anything they want about podcasting. And you do this for 3 hours on Saturday.
No, 90 minutes.
Oh, I was about to say, that's a long time.
No, it's an hour and a half. And people go, well, why are you doing that? You're giving away money. That's free consulting. And I'm like, well, there are many topics that were birthed on Ask the Podcast Coach that I'm like, that's a good question. And I'll talk about it with my co-host, and the chat room will chime in. And then I'll let's put that one back in the oven. Let me go research that. And it'll come back out in like a month on the School of Podcasting.
Nice.
So you
get that engagement, and then it goes back to your
podcast. So I'll do the answer off the top of my head, but then I'll be like there was one we were talking about, your show is good. You're not wasting your audience's time, but we know that somewhere between 60 and 70% of podcasts are discovered via word of mouth. So what makes people share your show, and why don't they do it on every episode? And so we kind of hashed that out for a little bit. And a lot of it is, how do you make people feel? Like if you're doing something that's kind of nostalgic, there are people like, oh man, I'm going to share this with my high school buddy, or whatever. But it's when you start to tug on the heartstrings is when they'll start to share it in some cases. And it was a really interesting discussion when we did it live. But then I went back later, and I'm reading books and asking ChatGPT and Perplexity and Google and anything I can find, like what makes things, why do people share stuff? And then that episode came out about 3 weeks after the original discussion on the School of Podcasting. So I use it to just harvest ideas and see what people are stuck on.
It's like a cycle. It's like you're generating ideas, and then you're bringing people in from one venue to the other. They're listening to the podcast, but they're also part of School of Podcasting. They're also maybe asking you questions live, and then it's just kind of like a cycle of ideas that you've got. It's your own workflow, and it's just so cool to see you do your thing and do it your way. And one thing I really love about podcasting is like it's an open space. It's always felt open to me. Like everybody shares, and we're committed to being to giving back. And that's what I love. It's just like I don't feel like anybody's holding secrets or gatekeeping. We're just here to share.
Yeah, it's well, I think part of that is we've seen the demise of great content on mainstream media, and we don't want to see that take over podcasting. I get a little worried when, some of these shows are, radio's 30% ads. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that is not a target. That is not our goal. Like, let's keep it around 10. If you're going to do the advertising thing, let's keep it about 10%.
Yeah.
But when you get some of these celebrities, like I like Conan O'Brien, but I'm like, he needs to rename his show. Conan O'Brien needs some cash. Cause I'm like, he'll do an 8-minute clip, and in the middle of it, there's a 90-second ad. And I'm like, didn't you sell your show to like Sirius for $3.8 gazillion? I'm like,
Like, what's the need for all of this extra?
yeah, what the heck?
I know.
So, yeah, but it's a lot of fun. It's been fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I just watched it evolve over the years, and it's going to be interesting what it is 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
I'm curious. But so you offer so many things to our listeners. I'm just really glad to have spoken to you today. I've been, like I said, listening to you for a long time and learned a lot from you. And so where can our listeners go to learn more about your offerings, your courses, products, anything that you have to offer listeners?
Yeah, I mean, my primary website is schoolofpodcasting.com. If you need one place to go where you just see all of my stuff, which is, just scatterbrained of everything, you can go to powerofpodcasting.com.
Powerofpodcasting.com. Perfect. Thank you, Dave, for your time today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was great.
It's fun.